We have a major Milwaukee Bucks trade update as a brand new report has dropped revealing some very interesting information surrounding Bobby Portis and the Bucks trade plans. We're going to break down that report and discuss what it means going forward, as well as some injury updates ahead of tonight's Cup final game against the Oklahoma City Thunder. So stay tuned for all that in this episode. But before we get into it, a quick reminder, hit that subscribe button. If you're a part of the around 80% who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Bucks content. So make sure to smash that subscribe button. And thank you guys again for your continued support. But ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot to go over today. We have a brand new report that dropped revealing the Bucks trade plans, as well as what their plan is surrounding Bobby Portis, which is a very interesting thing to discuss because trade reports, rumors, everything is flying right now, especially since Dennis Schroeder was traded to the Golden State Warriors in exchange for what was a pretty light package. But we'll start with the trade update, and we'll also get into the injury updates ahead of tonight's game as well. But the Bucks Zone report, the Milwaukee Bucks have gauged the trade market on Bobby Portis to find rotational upgrades per Evan Siddery. With Milwaukee over the second apron, they can't take back salaries totaling more than $12.6 million. He's averaging 13 and 8 while shooting 36.7% from the three-point line. So there's a lot of things to go over here. Now, again, it's interesting because Bobby Portis has been a name that has been, some Bucks fans love him, some Bucks fans don't. His defense has been very lackluster to say the least, but especially this season, he's been so up and down with the Milwaukee Bucks. There's times where he looks like an extremely valuable bench piece, especially in absence of Giannis and things like that. But when they're fully healthy, and we've seen Gary Trent Jr. continue to play well. Of course, we saw the emergence of AJ Green, all these different guys. None of them are big men, of course. But when you're looking at bench big men, the Bucks clearly want to find rotational upgrades. And it's been kind of rumored that they want to upgrade specifically their backup center/power forward position, which is what Bobby Portis occupies right now. We've heard names like Walker Kessler. We've heard a ton of different names. But what we haven't heard is an actual, and we don't know exactly if they're going to move Bobby Portis in order to acquire that. And the biggest thing, which is kind of a bit of a important key bit of information here, is that they can't total in anything you get back from Bobby Portis, assuming you're just trading Bobby Portis, you can't get back salary more than $12.6 million, which means in any of these deals, you'd have to get someone who isn't a superstar necessarily, which is why the report basically says they're looking to find rotational upgrades. And I'll dive into a trade here in a minute that dropped, which is intriguing as well. But at the end of the day, it's they're gauging the trade market and are still actively shopping Bobby Portis. We've seen reports come out from a couple weeks ago, and even recent reports about the Bucks targeting guys like Torrey Craig, guys looking to trade guys like Marjon Beauchamp, Pat Connaughton. Those are still names that the Bucks are actively looking to trade. We've discussed this in a video in the past. Torrey Craig would be interesting. Like, they're shopping for a bunch of different players now, whether that's wings, whether that's centers. We of course know it's been months now, since really over a couple months now, since they've been shopping Pat Connaughton. So that's been going on for months. And now it's the first time in a little bit we've heard a firm report that they are shopping and gauging the trade market on Bobby Portis. And it does make sense given how he's played. And an article dropped here, again, we'll get into the injury report in a minute, but from Bobby Marks saying, sources confirmed to ESPN they had a deal in place last season to send Portis to Dallas for Grant Williams, which is, again, it doesn't really matter now because this was last season, but it goes to show they have continued to shop Bobby Portis over the past handful of seasons, specifically the last couple of years, and especially since they got Dame. And the reason for that is, of course, you need more defenders. Dame and Bobby don't play the same position, play polar opposite positions, but that doesn't change the fact that they need defenders. They need role players. They need guys who can actually be tenacious defensively. That's why they're still starting, for the most part, Andre Jackson Jr. He does great he rebounds phenomenally as a guard. He plays great defense as a guard, and he helps and has paired perfectly alongside Damian Lillard, which has helped them win so many games and be undefeated in the Cup, the NBA Cup that is. But Bobby Marks kind of proposes a mock trade here. Nick Batum, Chris Dunn, Amir Coffey, PJ Tucker, Kobe Brown, Bobby Portis, Pat Connaughton, AJ Johnson, Chris Livingston, Tyler Smith, a 2031 second. This trade is ridiculous. It's like a bunch of role players in Batum, Dunn, Amir Coffey, PJ Tucker, all this with the Clippers, of course, in exchange for like a bunch of players the Bucks don't want, minus you're giving up AJ Johnson and Bobby Portis and a second. So let me know down below if you would do this deal if you are the Milwaukee Bucks. I don't think a deal like this gets done, but the reason I brought it up is because I think that they could potentially look at a couple of these guys in isolation. We've seen them linked to Amir Coffey. We've seen them linked to PJ Tucker, who's holding out and not playing. Even Nick Batum would make some sense. Like, adding a 3-and-D wing/guard would make a lot of sense in exchange for Bobby Portis. The problem is, at this point, you still don't really have a backup power forward. And I guess in this mock trade, and in this instance, if you assume that this deal happens, PJ Tucker would maybe be your backup power forward, but he's a small power forward. So I think if they I think they're going to make a couple of moves. I think they're going to go out and get a guy like Walker Kessler, someone of that nature and status. But they could also go out and get a guy like Amir Coffey, like Batum, like PJ Tucker, Chris Dunn, Kobe Brown. I don't think they give up AJ Johnson. He has been hooping very well. He's been playing very well for the Wisconsin Herd, which at this point, I think they're going to try to keep him because his value is pretty high right now. Was their first round pick in this most recent draft. And in the most recent draft, he played very well in the summer league and struggled a bit more in the preseason. So I think ultimately it's an interesting trade update. Bobby Portis is getting shopped. I do think they're going to trade him by the trade deadline, and I think they're going to get a big man as well as try to find other rotational upgrades surrounding, as Gary Trent Jr. continues to play well. AJ Green has kind of developed into a guy who's very important to this team. It makes trades like this a bit less realistic, I think, for the Milwaukee Bucks, because they don't need another guy who does what Gary Trent Jr. or AJ Green does, especially with how well AJ Green has been playing offensively and specifically defensively. So that makes it very interesting. But let me know down below what your thoughts are on this. And again, Bobby Portis is their backup power forward and center at this point. So in a potential move, you would assume, you can move Taurean Prince to the power forward spot, be a small power forward, but they have a pretty big team. So it'd be interesting to see. Let me know down below what your thoughts are on that. But we have a couple injury reports ahead, a couple injury updates ahead of tonight's game against the Thunder. So there's a couple different things. Giannis and Damian Lillard have seen their status downgraded to probable. We do, in all likelihood, expect to see them to play. And Damian Lillard came out and said he was going to play tonight, but he's been struggling with a right calf contusion, like we know. Chris Middleton dealing with an illness. He's probable, and that kind of makes some sense. He hasn't been playing quite as well as of late. Chris Middleton is struggling a little bit. I'm liking kind of the way Doc Rivers is using Chris Middleton, even though he isn't playing up to his standard, kind of running him as like the bench point guard. He's been facilitating very well, and the Bucks have ultimately been playing very well. We remember way back, they were 2-8, and now they've gone 12-3. Since then, they're undefeated in the NBA Cup. We saw Giannis come out and say, of course, they get the $500,000 each if they win. He said it's not about the money, it's about, just going out there and winning games. And I think it's going to be a very interesting game tonight because you're playing against an extremely good team in the Oklahoma City Thunder. And as they continue to roll here, and as the Bucks, again, 12-3, the record is getting 12-3 in their last 15. The record is getting really, really solid. They're really climbing themselves up in an Eastern Conference that is pretty top heavy at this point with, of course, the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Boston Celtics. But you're fifth in the East, you're 8 games back. It's going to be tough to get and to catch up to the Cavs and get to first place in the East. But if you just continue to fight and get a playoff spot, we know the team is starting to get healthy now, and that's all they've needed. And as you look at some of the things that they've done since Chris Middleton has come back, and Chris Middleton's played at like 50% of his capabilities here. Everybody is starting to find their role and really starting to work together well, even when Doc Rivers is still starting and has been for a while now, Andre Jackson Jr. into that starting lineup. I'm sure they'll factor Chris Middleton back into the starting lineup as well, like we've seen a little bit. So a bunch of different things going on. Ultimately, let me know down below what your thoughts are on the trade. Do you think they should trade Bobby Portis? Do you like a lot of the things that they're doing right now with Andre Jackson, Chris Middleton, or do you think that they need to make a big move? Let me know down below. See you later.